Okay, dear students, today we'll be starting with this topic of differentiation, de-differentiation, and redifferentiation. So this is a part of plant growth and development. In the last class, we had discussed about what is the definition of growth. We had also discussed about different types of growth, like the arithmetic growth and equation for this arithmetic growth we had discussed. Then geometric growth and the sigmoid curve that we get in the growth of these geometric growth, and also the formula for this geometric growth. So today we are going to discuss about one of the important aspects of differentiation, de-differentiation, and redifferentiation. So you can, in simple terms, see here we have a backdrop of a germinating plant seedling. Okay, so the meristematic tissues would be active at the growing tips, you know about that. So this meristematic tissue, if they lose their ability to undergo cell division and forms a permanent tissue, we call that process as differentiation. So the meristematic tissue differentiates to form permanent tissue. Our meristematic tissue converts itself into permanent tissue by losing its ability to undergo cell division. So this we call it as differentiation. See, I'm giving you in simple terms the definition of it. What is de-differentiation? So during secondary growth, you might have noticed that some of the cells in the cortical cells, parenchyma cells, they were permanent tissue. So these permanent tissues had formed by the differentiation of meristematic tissues. So they had formed permanent tissue. The permanent tissue, they regain their ability to undergo cell division. They regain their ability to undergo cell division. So this permanent tissue de-differentiates to form secondary meristem. So such newly formed meristematic tissue, we call it as secondary meristem. So the permanent tissue de-differentiates to form the secondary meristem. Example for this are, you might have the cork cambium is an example for de-differentiation process, wherein permanent tissue has regained its ability to undergo cell division, and they form the meristematic tissue. Such newly formed meristematic tissue, we call it as secondary meristem. Example for this is cork cambium, then interfascicular cambium. See the parenchyma cells in between the vascular bundles of dicot stem. They undergo de-differentiation. So this permanent tissue undergoes de-differentiation to form meristematic tissue. We call that meristematic tissue as interfascicular cambium. Within the vascular bundle, they already had intrafascicular cambium. In between the vascular bundle, so that is formed is called as interfascicular. Interfascicular cambium is an example for secondary meristem, and you should understand that they complete the ring vascular cambium. Okay, so the de-differentiation is the process of permanent tissue becoming a meristematic tissue. The process in which the permanent tissue regains its ability to undergo cell division and forms the meristematic tissue. Such newly formed meristematic tissue, we call it as secondary meristem. Okay, so what is redifferentiation? So this de-differentiated tissue, meristematic tissue, again they lose their ability to undergo cell division and forms permanent tissue. We call that process as redifferentiation. So the de-differentiated meristematic tissue or secondary meristem, if they lose their ability to undergo cell division and they form a permanent tissue, again they form a permanent tissue, we call this process as redifferentiation. So this is what it is. Differentiation, meristematic tissue to permanent tissue. They lose their ability to undergo cell division. De-differentiation, permanent tissue to secondary meristem they are going to form. So there is a regaining the ability to undergo cell division, especially during secondary growth. And redifferentiation is the secondary meristem which is formed. They lose their ability to undergo cell division and they form permanent tissue. Secondary meristem to formation of permanent tissue by losing their ability to undergo cell division. Again, we call it as redifferentiation. First time if it takes place, it is differentiation. So then the differentiated permanent tissue, if they regain their ability to undergo cell division, we call it as dedifferentiation. And the secondary meristem that is formed, the dedifferentiated secondary meristem, if they lose their ability to undergo cell division, again we call it as redifferentiation, and they become permanent tissue. Okay, so these are the three terms. In simple terms, I'm giving you the definition. So let us understand the definition here. See, differentiation is a process in which the meristematic cells, that is apical, root apex and shoot apex meristem, root apical meristem and shoot apical meristem, and cambium, they differentiate and mature to perform specific function. So they differentiate in the sense they lose their ability to undergo cell division and form a permanent tissue uh, to perform specific functions like root cell, leaf cell. They can differentiate, or even they can form the sieve tube. So this process we call it as differentiation. So differentiation is a process in which the meristem cells, it can be apical meristem of root or shoot. So the meristem cells and KBM, they differentiate and mature to perform specific functions. So whenever we are saying differentiate, they are losing their ability to undergo cell division, and they are going to mature to perform specific functions. So here in this example, the meristem cell has matured to form epidermal cell with root hairs. Here they have formed a leaf cell like mesophyll. The meristematic cell has differentiated to form sieve cell. So this is what we call it as differentiation. So during differentiation, cell walls and protoplasm undergo structural changes. The cell wall and protoplasm of the meristematic cell, they undergo structural changes. They also lose their capacity of cell division. The capacity of cell division is also lost during the differentiation process. So the loss of protoplasm to form a tracheary element, they also develop very strong, elastic, lignocellulosic secondary cell walls. So to carry water to long distances, even under extreme tension. So the loss of protoplasm to form a tracheary element. So here we do not have the tracheary element. This is sieve cell. So the loss of protoplasm example for differentiation is loss of protoplasm to form a tracheary element. They also develop very strong elastic lignocellulosic secondary cell wall to carry water to long distance even under extreme tension. So they carry water to long distances even under extreme tensions. So that is what is about this differentiation process with an example. So under certain conditions, leaving differentiated cells regain the capacity of division. This is called as dedifferentiation, especially during the secondary growth. Under certain conditions, the leaving differentiated cells, like the permanent tissues, they regain the capacity of cell division. This is called dedifferentiation. Example is formation of meristems. This is the interfascicular cambium. So the parenchyma present in between these vascular bundles, they de-differentiate to form meristem. Such newly formed meristem, we call it as secondary meristem, and this we call it as de-differentiation process. So under certain conditions, the leaving differentiated cells, they regain the capacity of cell division. This is called as de-differentiation. Example, formation of meristems, especially interfascicular cambium and cork cambium. The outside they are going to form this cork cambium. So from differentiated parenchyma cells. So they are going to de-differentiate from differentiated parenchyma cells. So that is the example for de-differentiation. So this differentiation you can even remember in simple terms: conversion of meristem to permanent tissue. De-differentiation is reconversion from permanent to meristematic tissue. Redifferentiation is reconversion from uh, permanent to, again, from the permanent, from meristematic to the permanent tissue. So this is how you can remember: conversion, so deconversion, reconversion. So you can remember it as simple terms. So meristem to permanent, permanent to meristem, secondary meristem to permanent. So that is how you can remember the, in simple terms, this concept of it. Now the de-differentiated cells, that is those which have formed secondary meristem, they can produce cells that again lose the capacity to divide but mature to perform specific function. So the de-differentiated cells can produce cells that again lose the capacity to divide, but they mature to perform specific functions. So this is called as redifferentiation. So plant growth is open, that is, it can be indeterminate or determinate. So differentiation is also open because cells or tissues arising out of the same meristem have different structures at maturity. Some of them might form parenchyma cells, some of them might form the sieve tube, some of them might form the root cells. See, they are all arising from the same meristem, but they have different structures at maturity. That is what you have to remember. So plant growth is open type, that is, it can be determinate or indeterminate type. It can be growing along throughout its lifetime, or it can be definite, like in case of biannuals, annuals. So their growth is definite. Okay, so differentiation is also the open because the cells or tissues arising out of the same meristem, they have different structures at maturity. So the final structure at maturity of cell or tissue is also determined by the location of the cell. So the final structure at maturity of cell or tissue is also determined by the location of the cell, where they are located. Okay, here there is a slide. So differentiation. So the meristematic tissue has differentiated. So then they have formed the meristematic tissue. So differentiation takes place. The permanent tissue is going to form meristematic tissue. This meristematic tissue again becomes a permanent tissue. We call that process as de-differentiation. So during de-differentiation, so they can, again they can undergo. So after de-differentiation, so meristematic to permanent, permanent to meristem, secondary meristem. So now they are again undergoing redifferentiation. That is, from secondary meristem, they again become the uh, permanent tissue. Okay, so that we call it as the redifferentiation process. This death of cell and cell cycle. So they're all associated with this process. Final structure at maturity of cell or tissue is also determined by the location of the cell, where they are located. If they are at the outer part of it, they might become the epidermal cells. If they are at the inner part of it, they might become the vascular tissue. So the cell positioned away from root apical meristem. So the example they give, the cell which is positioned away from root apical meristems, they are going to differentiate to form root cap cells, while those pushed to the periphery, they mature as epidermis. I was just talking about this. So cells positioned away from the root apical meristem, they are going to form the root cap cells, while those pushed to the periphery, they are going to mature as epidermis. So it is cells position also determines what type of uh, differentiation or mature cell that they have to become. The next thing that we have to discuss about is plant development. So the development, how does it take place? So the backdrop slide, you can see the plant at a developmental stage. So there is a sprouting up of new leaves. So it is just a plant sapling which is under growth. So growth and development are interlinked. So plant development is a process that includes all changes in the life cycle of an organism from seed germination to senescence. So plant development includes all changes in the organism life cycle of an organism from the germination of seed to senescence. That is the death of the uh, part. So what is plant development? It includes all the changes in the life cycle of an organism from seed germination to senescence. So it can also be defined as the sum of growth and differentiation. Development, plant development equals sum of, that is, growth plus differentiation. So it is also represented as follows. So this entire process is also represented as follows. The plant development, it is from the seed germination to senescence in a living organism. So that we call it as development. So here you can see a meristematic cell. So they are going to undergo differentiation to form a mature cell. Okay. So the meristematic cell, there is cell division, cell elongation, and cell differentiation. So this process, cell division takes place. So there is cell elongation that is taking place, expansion or elongation, and the cell differentiation or maturation. So the meristematic cell is going to form a mature cell. And now this mature cell undergoes aging up process, senescence, and they are going to undergo death. Okay, so the meristematic cell forms the uh, permanent tissue. Differentiation it undergoes, and they are going to form the mature cell. So this mature cell also ages up, that is senescence, and they are going to die. So this entire process of the development from the seed germination, the development or the life cycle of an organism from seed germination to senescence, we call it as development. So development can be defined as growth plus differentiation. So there is a plasmatic growth, the expansion of the cell takes place, plus differentiation. So this is an example for it, example for the development. So growth plus differentiation both are taking place. Even here, the zygote, they undergo divisions to form 16-celled embryo from hard stage embryo. So from the uh, organism, that life cycle of an organism from seed germination to senescence. So then the heart-shaped embryo is there. When the seeds germinate, they are going to form the cotyledons. Then the leaves are going to develop. So they are going to undergo from juvenile stage to adult stage to reproductive stage. So this development from the life cycle from the of an organism from seed germination to senescence, aging up, we call it as development. Development equals growth plus differentiation. So this slides indicates development from zygote to the reproductive stage of an adult plant. See, the plants are also going to follow different pathways in response to environment or phases of life to form different kinds of structure. So this ability of plants, we call it as plasticity. This flexibility is there in plants. So plants follow different pathways in response to different phases of life or different environment, in response to environment or different phases of life to form different kinds of structure. So this ability or this ability of flexibility, we call it as plasticity. Example for this is heterophily. Hetero means many, phily means leaves, many type of leaves due to the phases of life. So heterophily due to phases of life. So here example is cotton, coriander, and larkspur. So cotton, coriander, and larkspur. We have taken the example of larkspur. So coriander also we can take up as example. Kotamari soppu. So the leaves of the juvenile plants. So this is how they look, and the leaves of a mature plants are different in shape. The leaves of a juvenile plant and a mature plant, they are different in shape. So this heterophily due to phases of life. Juvenile means when they are very young, and adult phase. So mature plants is the adult phase. So the leaves are different in shape. So we call this as heterophily due to phase of life. So plants follow different pathways in response to environment or phases of life to form different structures. This ability we call it as plasticity. So they might ask you define plasticity with an example. So you should be writing that plants follow different pathways in response to environment or phases of life to form different structures. This ability or this ability to be elastic or this ability we call it as plasticity. Example is the larkspur or coriander or cotton. The juvenile phase of leaf is different in shape when compared to the shape of leaf in an adult. So this is heterophily due to phases of life. Then there is heterophily due to environment. Example, they have taken buttercup. So you can find it in most of the aquatic plants. So difference in shape of leaves produced in air and water. So the leaves which are produced in water, they are highly dissected. So difference in shapes of leaves which are produced in water is highly dissected, whereas the leaves in air, they are larger. So example is buttercup is the aquatic plant that you can remember about. So heterophily due to environment. So difference in shapes of leaves produced in air and water. Example is buttercup. Now we'll study the what are the factors which affect the plant development. So plant development is nothing but growth plus differentiation. So that is what we call it as plant development. It is the life cycle of an organism from the seed germination to the uh, formation of the still senescence. We call this life cycle of an organism from germination of seed to senescence as development. Development is also sum of growth and differentiation. So now what are the factors which affect plant development? So external factors, internal factors. So internal factors, we call it as intrinsic factors. I've always told you, even in the plants, what type of plants they should be. It is there, not Hane Baraha, genetic makeup. Okay, so they are going to determine whether they are short plant, tall plants, what type of fruits they have to produce. Everything is determined by their genetic makeup. It is an intrinsic factor. So intracellular. So intrinsic factor, first one is intracellular, that is genetic factor. Intercellular, like in between the cells. So what are those intercellular factors? Intracellular within the cell is genetic factors. Intercellular is the plant growth regulators or phytohormones. So the plant growth regulators or plant hormones, they are of two types. They can promote growth or they can inhibit growth. So growth promoters, plant growth promoters, and plant growth inhibitors. So the intercellular within the cells, what are the factors are this plant hormones or phytohormones. Okay, so they can be either growth promoter or growth inhibitor. Then extrinsic factor, external factors which affects the plant development from a seedling to and still they attain senescence. So what are those external factors which affect them? Light, for photosynthesis to be maximum, light is required. Quality of light, intensity, uh, then wavelength of light. So they are all going to play an important role in the development of plant. So temperature, so the temperature, optimum temperature, if it is there, there is the enzyme activity would be maximum and there would be uh, growth and development. So the temperature also plays an important aspect in the plant development. Water availability, then oxygen and nutrition, So the nutrition in the sense mineral nutrients, what do they have? Macronutrients and micronutrients. If they are available in proper concentration, only if they are available in proper concentration, there is a healthy development of plant, or they might have various deficiency symptoms like stunted growth, chlorosis of leaves, uh, then necrosis. So all that we have discussed in the deficiency symptoms during the mineral nutrition chapter. So nutrients that they get, that also plays an important role in the proper development of plant. So there is extrinsic factor, external factors, intrinsic factors, internal factors. This intrinsic factors can be intracellular within the cell, that is genetic factor. It can be intercellular, that is the plant growth regulators. So the plant growth regulators, the plant hormones or phytohormones. So the plant growth regulators are like plant hormones or phytohormones. So plant growth regulators, PGRs, what we are calling from henceforth, we might be using this PGRs as a short acronym. So plant growth regulators are small, simple molecules that regulate plant growth. Okay, so that is the hormones. You know the definition of hormones. Hormones are also called as chemical messengers. They are secreted at very low concentration. So they are secreted in very low concentration at their target region, at their synthesis region, but they have their effect at the target region. So hormones in animals are carried by blood. Here hormones are carried through the uh, phloem. The hormones are carried. Okay, so the plant growth regulators are small, simple molecules that regulate plant growth. So these hormones, they are present in part per million. So we call it as ppm. Such very low concentration is sufficient for the plants to have normal growth. So based on their functions, the plant growth regulators are two groups. Okay, so they are, but before that, hormones definition also let us understand. Hormones are chemical messengers which are secreted at very low concentration, and it has its effect at the target region. Okay, so hormones are chemical messengers which are secreted at very low concentration, and it has its effect at the target region. So plant growth promoters, so the plant growth regulators are of two types. The plant growth promoters, they promote growth activities like cell division, enlargement, tropic growth, growth towards the source of various stimulus like light, water, or other factors. Then pattern formation, flowering, fruiting, and seed formation. So flowering, fruiting, and seed formation, all these development aspects is promoted by these hormones. So we call this plant growth regulator as plant growth promoters. So for growth promoting, plant growth promoters, they are going to promote activities like cell divisions, enlargement or cell enlargement, uh, tropic movements of plant, tropic growth movements, pattern formation, flowering, fruiting, and seed formation. Example for this plant growth promoters are auxins, gibberellins, and cytokinins. So they are the examples for this plant growth promoters. Auxins, gibberellins, and cytokinins. They are plant growth promoters. The second variety are plant growth inhibitors. Inhibitors, they prevent growth. So for growth inhibiting activities like dormancy and abscission layer, formation of abscission layer leads to shedding up of leaves, fruits, and flowers. Whenever there is an abscission layer formed, so the leaves are shed. If they are formed at the base of the leaves are shed. If they are formed at the base of the floral stalk, the flowers are shed. If they are formed at the stalk of the fruits are shed. So the dormancy and abscission layer formation, so they are going to inhibit growth activities. So they respond to wound and stresses of biotics and abiotic origin is also one of the activity of growth inhibitors. Growth inhibitors also respond to wounds and uh, stresses of biotic and abiotic origin. So the examples for this growth inhibitors, plant growth inhibitors are abscisic acid, which is also called as ABA, and ethylene. See, ethylene is the only gaseous hormone which brings about the ripening of fruits. So it is a gaseous hormone. We should remember about that. So ethylene fits into both of the groups, but it is majority it does the growth inhibition. That is the reason ethylene is placed under growth inhibitors. But they also have a few growth promoter activities. So abscisic acid we call it as ABA. Gibberellins it is also called as gibberellic acid GA. So as and when I discuss about them individually, I'll be telling you about them. Ethylene fits either of the group. That is, it can be either growth regulator or growth promoter or growth inhibitor, but it is largely a growth inhibitor because of which we have placed ethylene under plant growth inhibitors. So let us start with discussion of this plant growth regulators or phytohormones. The first one that we'll discuss is auxins. Auxins in Greek language means to grow. Auxins in Greek language means to grow. So Charles Darwin, one who put forth this theory of evolution, and his son Francis Darwin observed that coleoptiles of canary grass. You know the coleoptiles. When you have drawn the structure of monocot seed, okay, you might have drawn that the plumule is protected by a membranous structure called as coleoptile, and the radicle is protected by a membranous structure called as coleorhiza. Okay, so these are present only in case of monocot. You don't find it in case of dicot seed. So the monocot seed, you might have drawn that coleoptile, which is a membrane that protects the plumule region. Now, Charles Darwin and his son Francis Darwin, they observed that coleoptiles of canary grass, they respond to unilateral elimination if they had a single source of light. So this coleoptile of canary grass, they started growing towards the source of light. So they exhibited the positively phototropic movement. So they exhibited phototropism, movement towards the source of light. It was concluded that the tip of the coleoptile caused the bending of the entire coleoptile. So when a coleoptile of canary grass was exposed to unilateral light, just assume the light was here. So the plant, the coleoptile tip bent towards the source of light. So it was this phototropism they exhibited. It was concluded that the tip of the coleoptile caused the bending of the entire coleoptile of the plant. So they also did this experiment wherein the coleoptile bent towards the source of light. In B experiment, they cut the tip of the coleoptile, so it did not bend towards the source of light. So when they in the third part of it, when they placed the cut part of the coleoptile, they bent towards the source of the light. So when they replaced this cut part of the coleoptile, they bent towards the source of light. So through this experiments, they came to a conclusion that there should be some material within this tip of this coleoptile, which is responsible for this phototropic movement exhibited by the coleoptile or bending of coleoptile towards the source of light. So F.W. Wendt was another scientist who isolated auxin from the tip of this coleoptiles of oat seedlings. Oat is Avena sativa. So Avena curvature test, they also call it as. So FW went isolated from the Avena coleoptile the auxins, that is oat seedlings, coleoptiles of oat seedlings, he isolated auxins. Okay, auxin was also first isolated from human urine. So auxin was also isolated from human urine. So auxins are produced by the growing apices of stem and roots from where they migrate to regions of their action. So since they are found at the tips of the coleoptile, you can understand that auxins are produced at the root and shoot apices, the growing apices of the stem and root, from where they migrate to regions of their action. The types of auxins are two types. Natural auxins. Example is IAA, indole 3 acetic acid. See, most of them have this acetic acid ending it. So the natural auxins which occurs in nature is IAA, indole acetic acid. See here in this plant, in this slide, you can see that uh, the bending up of this tip of the stem towards the source of light. Okay, so the bending up of tip of stem towards the source of light. So the naturally occurring auxins are indole 3 acetic acid IAA and indole butyric acid IBA. So they are the two things that you are naturally occurring auxins. Indole acetic acid, which we call it as indole 3 acetic acid, which we call it as IAA, and IBA, which is indole butyric acid. So they are isolated from plants. They are naturally occurring auxins. You should remember these examples. They might even ask you to expand IAA, indole 3 acetic acid, then IBA, indole butyric acid. Then synthetic auxins, examples for synthetic auxins are NAA, that is naphthalene acetic acid, and 2,4-D, so that is dichlorophenoxy acetic acid. See, now NAA is naphthalene acetic acid. They are synthesized in the lab and they are similar to this auxins and they bring about the same effect as auxins. So the synthetic auxins which are synthesized in the labs are naphthalene acetic acid, NAA, and 2,4-D. So 2,4-D, you can expand it as 2,4-dichloro. That is at the second carbon atom, there is a chlorine attached, and fourth carbon atom also there is a chlorine attached. So 2,4-dichlorophenoxy acetic acid. So 2,4-dichlorophenoxy acetic acid. So this 2,4-D, it is used in the fields as a dicot herbicide. See, you can remove the dicot plants. One of the most toughest tasks for a farmer in the field is to remove the weeds. Okay, so if you're growing a paddy uh, crop, that is batta, rice plants. Okay, so we call it as paddy. After removing the hull, we call it as rice. ಭತ್ತ ಆಮೇಲೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಮೇಲ್ಗಡೆ ಇರುವಂತ ಸಿಪ್ಪೆ ತೆಗೆದಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಅಕ್ಕಿ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. So that is what is the difference between paddy and rice. See, you are having a crop of paddy, and there are many dicot plants which are growing in between the plants and they are drawing the nourishment and water which you want the paddy plants to utilize. So how are you going to remove this? So the earlier days they were painfully, they were employing laborers who used to pick each and every plant from the field. ಕಳೆ ಕೀಳೋದು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. So removing the weeds. See, weeds are unwanted plants and economically not important as per human beings. There are no weeds in nature. Everything is important in nature. But from human perspective, since they are not of any economic importance to him, for him it's an unwanted plant. So weed is an unwanted plant. Okay, from the perspective of human beings, it is. Okay, so the uh, you can notice that removing these weeds is very difficult process and labor intensive process. So the 2,4-dichlorophenoxy acetic acid, when you spray them in a paddy plant, paddy crops, you spray them, all the dicot plants, they receive the spray of this 2,4-D and they are going to die. But the paddy plants remain healthy because they are isobilateral leaf. They don't get affected by this 2,4-D, which is a dicot herbicide. We also call it as dicot weedicide. So they remove dicot plants. But you can't use this 2,4-D when you're growing pulses. You're growing the beans or you are growing this alsande or you're growing groundnut, you can't spray this 2,4-D because it will kill all the pulse plants because they are dicots, dorsiventral leaves. So you should remember where you can spray this. Auxins like 2,4-D can be used as a dicot herbicide whenever you are growing a crop of uh, the isobilateral leaves or monocot crop. Like you are growing cereals, you can use this as a 2,4-D can be used as a weed. Cereals in the sense paddy, wheat, barley, rye, oat, ragi, all these are cereals, isn't it? So the pulses, you cannot use them when you are growing them. And also you should notice that, I don't know how many of you know what is rotation of crops. See, the farmers, in order to improve the natural fertility of the soil, so what they do is in a given land of area, they never grow uh, all the seasons, they never grow only the uh, cereals. They grow one season, they grow the cereals, and the other season they grow the pulses. Okay, and they are not going to remove the root nodules of this pulses. They just remove the plant, but not the roots of the pulses because they have this root nodules. They can provide fertilizer for the soil. So the growing this pulses in between two uh, cereal crop, it is going to refertilize the soil. That is why they have this rotation of crops. In one season, they grow this cereal plants like paddy. The next season, they grow this pulses. So this is a natural way of replenishing the soil with the nutrients, with the fertilizers. That is how they are going to maintain the fertility of the soil by rotation of crops. Okay, so the farmers do that. You should be aware about that. That is the reason I brought it. So 2,4-D, which is a synthetic auxin, it is used for removing dicot weeds. So the it is a dicot weedicide. So I told you can't spray it where you are growing tomato. If you spray this 2,4-D, all the tomato plants will be killed. Okay, because they are dorsiventral leaves and the auxins, the 2,4-D, they are going to kill them. So remember this, many times in the NEET and CET, they have asked about 2,4-D. So which is the hormone that is we decide. So they have given different examples, NAA, IBA, ABA, 2,4-D. So 2,4-D is the right answer. So you should also remember to expand it. So they end up with acetic acid. Most of the auxins, they end up with acetic acid like IAA, indole 3 acetic acid, IBA, indole butyric acid, NAA, naphthalene acetic acid, then 2,4-D, 2,4-dichlorophenoxy acetic acid. So this is how you remember. So don't worry about the structural formula of this. Maybe for identification, they might give you in the examination these form. If it is there in the NCERT book, they might give you, and you need to identify that. So if you know the naphthalene structure, so you can easily identify this as naphthalene acetic acid, where they have double benzene ring. Okay, so indole acetic acid. So you notice this NH group will be there, hexose, pentose, and there is this functional group of carboxylic acid you find after CH2. So in case of indole butyric acid, so it is how many carbon atoms are there? Four carbon atoms are there, which is attached to this part. So butyric acid. So whereas here only two carbon atoms are there. So it's indole acetic acid, indole butyric acid, where they are having totally four carbon atoms and COOH group. Okay, so dichloro, as the name indicates, two chlorine are there, and you can notice this phenoxy structure. OH it will be, so H is replaced by this uh, acetic acid, CH2COOH. So there are two chlorines, then they have this structure. It's very easy to identify this dichloro 2,4 dichlorophenoxy acetic acid. Naphthalene, they have two benzene ring structure, and this CH2COOH. That is why it is naphthalene acetic acid. You need not worry about this. not mug this up, but you should be able to identify this structure. Seeing the structure, you should be able to tell what they are, whether they are indole acetic acid, indole butyric acid, naphthalene acetic acid, or 2,4-dichlorophenoxyacetic acid. It's very easy to identify them. Now, what are the functions of auxins? Auxins initiate rooting in stem cuttings for plant propagation. See, auxins, whenever the cut part of the stem, you know that some of the plants, if you just put the stem cutting, they are going to develop the roots from the base of the stem. So you might have done it for the rose plant, especially. You have this rose stems cut and you place it in the soil. After a few days, you find that roots are formed in them. Okay, so similarly, the hibiscus plant also, the stem cuttings they work, and you might have also seen the stem cutting in case of the plants such as stem cuttings of um, drumstick I've seen. So where they also they rather than growing the plant from seed germination to an adult plant, so the cut part of the stem they just get it and then they bury it in the soil. They start developing roots. So you find I have found a place where a very thick stem of this drumstick has started developing once they were sown in the soil. They start developing the roots. So this rhizogenesis, formation of roots, is one of the special property of this auxins. So they can help in initiate the rooting in root formation in stem cuttings for plant propagation. So now if you plant 25 rose stem cuttings, stem of rose plant, stem cuttings of rose plant, maybe 10 or 5 might survive. So, but if you have dipped this with a very low concentration of auxins and then you plant them in the soil, almost all the plants will start developing this uh, roots. Okay, so the root initiation. So roots can be the rhizogenesis or initiation of roots in stem cuttings can be done by utilizing auxins. So auxins have that capability to initiate root formation in stem cuttings of plants. The auxins also promote flowering. Example in pineapple. Example is promote flowering in pineapples. Example is pineapple, isn't it? So the what is the thing that we are eating in pineapple? It is the entire inflorescence. So the inflorescence part is what we are consuming in pineapples. So they promote flowering in pineapples. So the auxins can be used to prevent the premature shedding up of fruit and leaves at early stages. They are prevented by this auxins. So auxins prevents the formation of abscission layer. As a result of it, so the premature shedding up of fruits and leaves can be stopped. So the premature shedding of young fruit and leaf can be prevented by this auxins. So auxins prevents the formation of abscission layer. So they promote the abscission of older leaves and fruits. So auxins, by their absence, they promote the abscission of older leaves and fruits. Whenever the auxins are absent, the abscission of older leaves and fruits takes place. So the auxins also have the capability to induce parthenocarpy, that is formation of fruits without fertilization. Generally, you know that fruits are formed only when after fertilization. The ovary develops to form the fruit, ovule develops to form the seed after fertilization. But if you are spraying the auxins, so the fruits are formed without fertilization. Just like in banana plant, the banana fruits are naturally occurring parthenocarpic fruit. It is naturally occurring parthenocarpic fruit where they are formed, fruits are formed without fertilization. Okay, now tomatoes, you don't want to have seeds. You want to obtain a seedless variety of tomato. Then these auxin treated tomatoes, they are going to have the seedless variety of tomatoes. So parthenocarpy is induced parthenocarpy is formation of fruits without fertilization, and most of the time the parthenocarpic fruits are uh, seedless. So the auxins are also used as herbicides, especially 2,4-D, that is 2,4-dichlorophenoxyacetic acid. It is used to kill the dicot weeds. Okay, it does not affect monocot plants, and it is used to prepare weed-free lawns. See, lawn you grow the grass, isn't it? Now you don't want to have any dicot plants growing there. In the lawn, you can just spray them with 2,4-D. It kills all the dicot plants. Instead of painstakingly removing each and every dicot weed, you just spray this 2,4-D, which is a dicot herbicide or weedicide, and the lawn is free from these uh, dicot weeds. Or as I told in a farmer, so who is growing a paddy crop, for him the other unnecessary plants might be growing, the dicot plants together with them. So he would like to remove them by spraying this 2,4-D, which is a dicot weedicide. So the auxins also control xylem differentiation, and they help in cell division. So auxins also control the xylem differentiation, and auxins help in cell division. So this is what you have to remember about. So auxins control xylem differentiation, and auxins also help in cell division. So these are all the things that we have to remember regarding the uh, auxins, the physiological functions of auxins. Apart from that, there is apical bud dominance. See, whenever apical buds are present, the lateral buds, the axillary buds, they don't develop. So whenever the apical buds, the terminal buds are present, the axillary buds they don't develop. So the gardeners they know about this. So in the parks and other things, when they want to have a bushy plant, what they do is they cut the apical part of the buds. So whenever they trim off this apical buds, the lateral buds develop and they become bushy. Okay, so that is how they are made bushy by this removal of apical buds. So this you have to remember about. So apical bud dominance is because of auxins. Whenever the apical buds are removed, the lateral buds develop. Okay. So apical bud dominance is because of auxins. So that is also one uh, function of auxins. So in this slide, you know this cutoff tip. So the bending up of this plant towards the source of light only when the tip of this coleoptile is present. So if you add auxin to the top, also they bend towards the source of light. So auxins are also responsible for the phototrophic movement. Okay, so you add auxin at the top, so then growth towards the other side will be more, and as a result, they bend towards the source of light. You add auxin at the base of this plant. So these are just a slide to show the properties of auxins. Auxins are responsible for the phototrophic movement. Auxins are responsible for the formation of roots or initiation of roots, and for the removal of seeds in the strawberry. Okay, so remove seeds. Uh, so no addition, add auxin. So you find that the fruits develop. So here you have removed the seeds, and this strawberry, when there is no addition of auxins, they just remain as it is. When you add auxins for the strawberry fruit without seeds, so they develop. Okay, they enlarge. See, for removing seeds in the auxins, so without auxins, with auxins, you have the seedless variety because the fruits are formed without fertilization. Without auxins, there is the seed variety. So, and larger development of fruit is also there. Okay, so these are all the properties of auxins. And apical dominance I was just talking about. So in higher plants, the growing apical bud, so the growing apical bud, so you can find this lateral buds, the growing apical bud. So they are going to prevent the growth of lateral buds or axillary buds. So this lateral buds or axillary buds growth are prevented. So whenever you remove this apical bud, okay, so the lateral buds start developing. So removal of the shoot tips, decapitation. You remove the tip of the shoot, okay, the apical bud you remove, it results in the growth of lateral buds. This is applied in tea plantations, hedge making. You want a compound or fence like from the plants. For that, you have to trim the apical buds. Then they form a fence like uh, structure, hedge plant. They form like in the parks, you might have seen the gardeners do that. Okay, especially the Durantha plant as well as uh, there are clerodendrons. So Durantha and clerodendron, they are used as hedge plant. So they are trimming this apical bud. Whenever you remove the apical bud, the lateral buds develop. So removal of shoot tips, decapitation results in the growth of lateral buds. It is applied in tea plantation as well as hedge making. So this property is because of auxins. So auxins are going to result in apical dominance. So auxin concentration is more in the apical bud. So whenever we remove the apical bud, the concentration of auxin shifts towards the lateral buds. Cytokinins can also bring about the lateral bud development. Later, when we come to that, we'll discuss. Next, we are going to discuss about the gibberellins. So the discovery of gibberellins was done by Japanese scientists. So you can they noticed an unusual disease in paddy plants. So they called it as foolish seedling disease or Bacchanae disease. So they noticed it in the paddy plants or rice plants. Okay, so these were the normal paddy plants, and this is the plant, the elongation. So stunting of rice plants, you can notice here, elongation of plants. In the Bacchanae infection in the field showing elongation, unusual growth of this paddy plants, and later the stunting of rice plants. So before they could produce the yield, they stunted. So this unusual disease was noticed in paddy plants. So the farmers in Japan were very happy when they saw that there was a luxuriant growth of this paddy plants, and they were unusually tall. So they felt that their yield would be good. But when they were expecting a very good yield, suddenly the plants withered away. As a result, it fooled them in believing that they might get a very good yield. That is the reason they call this Bacchanae is a Japanese name for this disease. So Bacchanae disease of rice plants or paddy plants. It is also called as foolish seedling disease because it fools the farmers in believing that they'll get a good yield, but they had a stunted growth. So Kurosawa treated the sterile filtrates of Gibberella fujikuri, a fungus, okay, to healthy rice seedlings. So he showed this. So this disease was caused by Gibberella fujikuri, a fungi. So now Kurosawa was Japanese biologist who took this Gibberella fujikuri. It is a fungi which causes this disease. You should remember for 1 mark, they might ask you, dash causes the foolish seedling disease or Bacchanae disease, Gibberella fujikuri. So Kurosawa treated Gibberella fujikuri to healthy rice seedlings. As a result of this treatment of exposure to this fungi, Gibberella fujikuri, it showed the symptoms of Bacchanae disease. Later, they extracted the active substances which were identified as gibberellic acid. I told you how this foolish seedling disease or Bacchanae fooled the farmers of Japan. And later, when they made a study, they understood that this disease is caused by a fungi, Gibberella fujikuri, which led to internodal elongation. As a result, they found very tall plants of this rice seedling, but they withered away immediately after this without giving a good yield. That is why this is called as foolish seedling disease. So the extract, they were able to identify that it is caused by fungi. They knew about that. They identified that this Bacchanae or foolish seedling disease is caused by a fungi, Gibberella fujikuri. So, and the substance that caused this unusual growth was gibberellic acid. They extracted that gibberellic acid, which they call it as gibberellins or gibberellins, however you pronounce it as gibberellins. So there are more than 100 gibberellins. So each one of them are labeled as GA1, GA2, GA3, etc. So they have identified more than 100 types of gibberellic acids. So they are named as GA1, GA2, gibberellic acid 1, gibberellic acid 2, so on. So they have identified still now 100 varieties of gibberellins in fungi and higher plants. Gibberellic acid or GA3, it is a terpenoid, is one of the first discovered and most intensively studied gibberellins. So for NEET, they might ask you, the first discovered and most intensively studied gibberellins is GA5, GA1, GA3, GA100. So the answer is GA3 or terpenes. So that is the first discovered and most intensively studied gibberellins. What are the functions of this gibberellins? So they cause increase in length of axis. So they are used to increase the length of grape stalk. See, the grape stalk can be increased in length. As a result of that, you get a very high yield. So whenever you increase the internodal distance, the they yielded more grapes. Okay, they cause increase in length of axis, internodal axis also. So they are used to increase the length of grape stalk. This is a normal grape stalk without treatment of gibberellins, and this is a grape stalk with treatment of gibberellins. So the distance of this floral stalk has increased. As a result of it, more fruits are there, larger fruits are there. Okay, so they cause increase in length of axis, the gibberellins, especially the internodal length, it increases. So now if you want to have sugarcane, you might have found that at the nodal region of the sugarcane, the taste is not good. They are hard. So whenever you purchase sugarcane, you see to it that the internodal distance is more and these nodal regions are lesser. So you don't purchase a sugarcane which has very short internodal distance. So you can increase the yield of sugarcane by increasing the internodal distance. So that can be done by spraying with gibberellins. So gibberellins, they cause increase in length of axis. So they are used to increase the length of grape stalk, to elongate and improve the shape of fruits such as apple. So apple shape, it is very small, so they can elongate and improve the shape of fruits such as apple when they are sprayed with this gibberellins. Gibberellins delay senescence. The aging up process can be delayed by gibberellins. So the fruits can be left on the tree to extend the market period. Okay, so whenever you have sprayed the gibberellins, they not only elongate and improve the shape of fruits, but also they delay senescence. They delay the aging up process. So you can sell it after the season and get more money. Okay, so the fruits can be left on the tree to extend the market period. Okay, so these are all perishable fruits. So you can extend the market period of this by leaving them on trees and only plucking them when it is required. This you can do. You can delay senescence by spraying the plants with gibberellins. GA3 is used to speed up malting process in brewing industry. Malt, especially in the preparation of beer, the beverage industries, they use this malting process. So GA3 can speed up this malting process in brewing industry. So they are used for making whiskeys, beer. So that process of speeding up of this malting can be done by this gibberellins. Sugarcane stores sugar in stems. Spraying sugarcane crop with gibberellins increases the length of the stem. Okay, so it increases the yield by as much as 20 tons per acre. So sugarcane plants, whenever they are sprayed with this gibberellins, so they increase the length of the stem. It increases the yield by as much as 20 tons per acre. So the spraying the juvenile conifers, so the coniferous plants, they are very slow to grow. So you spray them with GAs, they hasten the maturity period. So the juvenile conifer plants, like you have this Christmas tree or the pinus tree, they are very slow growing. It takes a lot of time for them to grow. Now spraying them with this gibberellic acid, it hastens the maturity period. It also leads to early seed production in this conifer plants. For bolting, internode elongation just prior to flowering. So we call it as bolting. So the uh, bolting and flowering. So it can be induced. So in beet, cabbages, and many plants with rosette habit. Okay. So now still they have this the cabbages, beet, many of these plants, they have this structure that they produce flowers only when they increase in internodal distance. So bolting and flowering. If they are in rosette arrangement, they don't produce flowers. Now you can induce them to produce flowers whenever you can induce bolting. So they are taking two seasons for, one is the vegetative phase, another is the reproductive phase. So you can overcome this by internodal elongation, by spraying them with gibberellins. That itself, once there is bolting, it induces flowering. So in beetroot, cabbages, you can notice this, and many plants with rosette habit, when you induce bolting, they are going to produce flower. So bolting is nothing but elongation of internodes. Okay. So up to gibberellins, we'll have it for today. In the next class, we'll discuss the remaining hormones, the remaining plant hormones. Do you have any doubts or clarifications, dear students?